Oh. So you finally decided to look up, did you? You finally felt it, didn't you? That strange electric current running through your spine when you walk into rooms that suddenly get quieter. That unexplainable weight pressing on your chest when your phone lights up with messages from people who haven't thought about you in years. That tingling sensation at the back of your neck telling you something massive has shifted in the atmosphere around your existence. Well, let me tell you something that's going to rearrange every assumption you've ever made about your place in this world. Your name. Yes, your name. The one you whisper to yourself in the mirror when you're practicing confidence. The one that feels so ordinary to you. That name is currently being spoken in rooms you will never enter, by people whose faces you'll never see, in contexts so wildly different from each other that if you heard them all at once, your brain would short circuit trying to make sense of it. And I'm not talking about casual mentions. I'm not talking about, oh yeah, I remember them from that thing. No. I'm talking about your name being the central character in stories you didn't even know you were part of. I'm talking about your name being the answer to questions people are desperately asking. I'm talking about your name being the example, the warning, the inspiration, the obsession, the breakthrough, the case study, the cautionary tale, the success model, and the standard all at once. You want proof? Let me paint you a picture so vivid you'll taste the reality of it. Right now, as you watch this, somewhere in a therapy session in a city you've never visited, a therapist is taking notes while their patient describes you. Not by your name, maybe, but by your characteristics, your energy, your impact. There was this person who... And the therapist is leaning forward because what they're hearing is textbook attachment trauma, textbook projection, textbook unresolved obsession, wrapped in the language of moving on. Your name might not be said out loud, but you're there, haunting the hour-long session, living rent-free in someone else's breakthrough moment. And in a boardroom, somewhere glass windows reach the sky and leather chairs cost more than monthly rent, executives are referencing you. Maybe not directly, maybe they're calling you, that situation we learned from, or remember when we dealt with that particular challenge. But make no mistake, you're the case file. You're the lesson they extracted value from. You're the experience they turned into strategy. They analyzed you, packaged you, learned from the way you moved, the way you responded, the way you didn't break when they expected you to shatter into a million exploitable pieces. You became data. You became the example they use when training new managers on how to handle difficult situations or complex personalities. They don't hate you in these rooms. They respect you, which is somehow more unsettling, because respect means they studied you thoroughly enough to recognize they couldn't break you down the way they broke down others. You were different. You were the equation that didn't solve the way it should have. You were the variable that changed the entire formula. And now you're part of their institutional memory, sealed in strategy documents, referenced in quarterly reviews, whispered about during coffee breaks when someone asks whatever happened with, and the room goes silent because everyone knows, but nobody says it out loud. They don't say it because speaking your name gives you power. Speaking your name acknowledges that you won something they're still trying to understand how they lost. But wait, there's more. Because while corporate strategists are analyzing you and therapists are unpacking you, there's another room. A quieter room. A room where someone is on their knees, hands pressed together, eyes closed, speaking to something bigger than both of you. And they're praying about you, not against you like you might think, not cursing you out to the universe like some bitter ritual. No, they're praying for you. They're asking for your peace. They're asking for your success. They're asking for your healing. They're asking forgiveness for what they did, what they said, what they contributed to. They're praying because your absence created a void so loud that silence became deafening. They're praying because they finally understood what they lost after it was too late to retrieve it. They're praying because every substitute they tried to fill your space with felt like cardboard cutouts compared to the three-dimensional presence you brought into their life. They're praying because late at night when the world goes quiet and the distractions fade away, your name is the one that surfaces from the depths of their regret, like a message in a bottle they can't ignore. And this isn't one person. This is multiple people in multiple places at multiple times, all doing the same thing, all reaching toward the same conclusion, that letting you go, pushing you away, underestimating you, or playing games with you was the biggest miscalculation of their existence. Let's go deeper, because we're only scratching the surface. Your name is in group chats you're not part of. Long threads where people who claim they don't think about you anymore can't stop bringing you up. Did you see? Do you think? Remember when? I wonder if. Hundreds of messages, thousands of characters, all circling around the gravitational pull of your existence. You're the ghost in their conversations, the elephant in their digital rooms, the energy they can't shake no matter how many times they tell themselves they've moved on. They track you without admitting they're tracking you. They notice without admitting they're noticing. They care without admitting they care. And it drives them absolutely insane because you're not performing for them anymore. You're not giving them the content they crave. You're not playing the character they wrote for you in their narrative. You went silent, and that silence is louder than anything you could have said. Your absence is more present than your presence ever was. You became the main character by simply removing yourself from their storyline, and that plot twist nobody saw coming is now the twist everyone is still trying to process, analyze, and somehow make sense of in a way that doesn't make them the villain of their own story. And it gets even more fascinating, because your name is also being mentioned in business pitches. In startup meetings where someone is explaining a concept and they say, it's like what happened with Trass, and your situation becomes the metaphor. You're the illustration. You're the real-world example that makes abstract concepts concrete. Someone, somewhere, is building an entire presentation around the lessons extracted from watching how you handled pressure, how you maintained integrity, how you refused to compromise yourself, even when compromise would have been easier, more profitable, more socially acceptable. You became a principle. You became a philosophy. You became proof that certain values aren't just theoretical. They're livable, survivable, achievable, even when the entire environment is designed to make you abandon them. Business students are studying you without knowing they're studying you. Leadership coaches are using your story without attributing it to you. Motivational speakers are referencing the patterns you demonstrated without ever mentioning your name explicitly. You became case study material for human resilience, strategic silence, and the power of maintaining composure under sustained psychological pressure. They bottled your essence and turned it into curriculum. They observed your moves and turned them into methodology. They watched you survive and turned survival into a teachable framework. Now let's talk about the social spaces, because those are interesting. Coffee shop conversations where friends are dissecting you with the analytical precision of forensic scientists. I think they did that because, no, I heard they were actually. But consider this angle. They're creating theories about you like you're some kind of mysterious phenomenon that needs explanation. They're connecting dots that don't exist, finding patterns in random noise, attributing meaning to actions that were meaningless, and completely missing the meanings behind actions that were deliberate. They're writing a mythology around you while you're just living your life. They're crafting a legend while you're just being yourself. And the funnier part? The real you, the actual you, the three-dimensional human being with flaws and fears and moments of absolute uncertainty, that version is so much more complex and interesting than the character they've created. But they don't know that. They can't know that. Because they're working with incomplete information, filling in the blanks with projection, creating a version of you that tells them more about themselves than it tells anyone about you. You're the mirror they're staring into while thinking they're looking through a window. You're the reflection that reveals their own insecurities, desires, regrets, and unfinished business. Every conversation about you is actually a conversation about them, and they don't even realize it. And then there are the midnight thoughts, the 3 a.m. spirals where someone is lying awake, staring at the ceiling, and your name crashes into their consciousness like a freight train they didn't see coming. They're replaying conversations from years ago, reanalyzing actions with the benefit of hindsight, and suddenly understanding meanings they completely missed in real time. They're having entire arguments with you in their head, conversations that never happened and never will happen, imaginary scenarios where they say what they should have said, where they do what they should have done, where somehow the outcome changes and the story has a different ending, but the ending already happened, the story already closed. And they're stuck in the epilogue, haunted by a conclusion they can't rewrite no matter how many times they rehearse alternative scripts in the theater of their regret. You're the phantom that visits them in these vulnerable hours, not because you're thinking about them, but because they can't stop thinking about you. Not because you need closure, but because they never got it. Not because you're reaching back, but because they never really let go. You exist in their unsent messages, their drafted but deleted texts, their opened then closed social media profiles, their typed then erased search queries. You're everywhere in their digital footprints, even though you're nowhere in their actual life. And that distance, that unreachable quality, that absolute finality of your departure from their orbit, it haunts them more effectively than any revenge you could have planned ever would. Let's shift to the professional realm again, because this is where it gets delicious. Your name is in performance reviews, not yours, other people's. Someone somewhere is being evaluated, and your name comes up as the benchmark. They handled it like, or unlike when we dealt with. You became the measuring stick. You became the standard against which other situations are judged. Managers are using you as the example of how to handle conflict with grace. Teams are referencing you as the model of maintaining professionalism under hostile conditions. Organizations are studying the aftermath of their interaction with you and realizing they learned more from you than they taught you. You were supposed to be the student, the subordinate, the one taking notes. Instead, you became the teacher, the authority, the one everyone is still studying years later. And this drives certain people absolutely crazy, because the narrative was supposed to be different. You were supposed to break. You were supposed to crack. You were supposed to validate their approach by failing under the pressure they applied. Instead, you thrived. You evolved. You emerged stronger, clearer, more refined. You turned their test into your testimony. You converted their pressure into your polish. You transformed their intended destruction into your demonstrated resilience. And now they can't unsee it. They can't unfeel it. They can't unknow what they learned by watching you refuse to become what they expected you to become. But here's where it gets psychological. Your name is in people's fear, in their "what if I become like them" anxieties, in their "what if they were right about me" insecurities, in their "what if I'm the villain in someone else's story" paranoia. You represent something that terrifies them, the possibility of being wrong, the reality of consequences, the mirror that reflects their choices back at them without the comfortable filter of justification. They see what happened with you, and they wonder if they're next. They watch how you recovered, and they question if they could do the same. They notice your peace, and it disturbs their chaos because peace shouldn't be possible after what you went through. Yet there it is, radiating from you like evidence of something they can't explain. You became the proof that their methods don't work the way they thought they worked. You became the data point that breaks their model. You became the exception that disproves their rule. And in a world where people desperately need their rules to make sense, you're the chaos they can't categorize, the variable they can't control, the outcome they can't predict. So they keep talking about you, analyzing you, referencing you, because if they can figure you out, maybe they can figure out how to protect themselves from becoming the next lesson someone else learns. And in creative spaces, you're everywhere. Writers are crafting characters based on you. Artists are creating pieces inspired by the way you moved through tragedy. Musicians are composing melodies that capture the specific emotional frequency you transmitted when you walked away from toxicity with your head high and your spirit intact. You're in poetry you'll never read, in songs you'll never hear, in paintings you'll never see. You became muse without ever agreeing to be one. Your story is being told in 1,000 different ways by 1,000 different voices, each one adding their interpretation, their spin, their meaning. Some will make you the hero. Some will make you the mystery. Some will make you the lesson. Some will make you the legend. And you won't control any of these narratives. But that's the point. You don't need to control them. They're not really about you anymore. They're about what you represent to each person who encountered you. They're about the space you occupied in someone's understanding of how the world works. They're about the crack you created in someone's reality that let new light pour through. You were the catalyst for transformations you'll never witness, the spark for revelations you'll never know about, the reason for changes you'll never be credited for. And that's power. That's influence. That's legacy happening in real time while you're just living your life, unaware of the ripples extending outward from the stone you threw simply by existing authentically. Now, let's address the jealousy factor, because your name is definitely being mentioned with that particular flavor of resentment that tastes like admiration but smells like envy. People are comparing themselves to you and coming up short in categories they thought they dominated. They're watching your progress and doing the mental math that doesn't add up the way they want it to add up. How are they doing better when they should be doing worse? The cognitive dissonance is eating them alive. They designed a world where you should have failed, and you didn't fail. They created conditions where you should have broken, and you didn't break. They established circumstances where you should have given up, and you didn't give up. Every day you continue to exist successfully is another day their hypothesis gets disproven. Every achievement you unlock is another piece of evidence against their theory of how things should work. Every moment of your peace is another contradiction to their narrative about how people like you should suffer. And they can't handle it. They literally cannot process the reality that you're not conforming to the story they wrote about you in their heads. So they talk about you, trying to find the explanation, the loophole, the secret, the trick, the unfair advantage. Anything that explains how you're winning when, according to their calculations, you should be losing. They need you to be lucky so they don't have to admit you're skilled. They need you to be privileged so they don't have to acknowledge you're resilient. They need you to be somehow cheating the system so they don't have to face the fact that you simply played the game better than they did while following rules they kept breaking. Let's go back to therapy sessions, because there's a specific type of mention happening there that's almost poetic in its irony. Someone is in therapy specifically to get over you, not to process shared trauma, not to heal from mutual difficulties. No, they're in therapy because you, specifically you, broke something in them when you left, when you succeeded, when you moved on, when you stopped being accessible to their dysfunction. The therapist is carefully, professionally, trying to help this person understand that what they're feeling isn't actually about you. It's about them, about their attachment patterns, about their fear of abandonment, about their need for control, about their inability to accept that other people are autonomous beings who don't exist to fulfill roles in their personal narrative. But the patient keeps bringing it back to you. But they didn't have to. But they could have. But I needed. And the therapist is taking notes, diagnosing patterns, recognizing textbook behaviors, identifying projection mechanisms, and internally knowing that the person sitting across from them is not actually mourning you. They're mourning the version of themselves that existed when you were around to absorb their chaos, to be their emotional punching bag, to play supporting character in their drama. You were a function. You served a purpose. And when you stopped performing that function, when you refused to continue serving that purpose, their entire psychological ecosystem collapsed. And now they're in therapy, paying someone to help them rebuild what you exposed as fundamentally unsustainable. Your name is in that therapy office as the case study of what happens when someone finally says no, when someone finally chooses themselves, when someone finally walks away from a dynamic that was slowly killing them. You're the before and after moment. You're the wake-up call. You're the mirror that forced them to see themselves clearly for the first time, and they hate it. They hate what they see, but they can't stop looking, can't stop bringing you up. Can't stop making you the centerpiece of their healing journey, even though the real work has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. In professional development circles, your name is attached to concepts like strategic silence, dignified exit, maintaining integrity under pressure. Leadership coaches are analyzing your behavior patterns and turning them into frameworks. Notice how they never defended themselves publicly, yet everyone eventually understood the truth. Observe how they maintained professional relationships, even with people who wronged them personally. Study how they converted obstacle into opportunity. You became a masterclass in things you weren't even conscious you were doing. You were just surviving, but survival at that level, executed with that much grace, becomes strategy. Others are trying to reverse engineer your success by dissecting your methods, not understanding that there was no method. There was just you, being yourself, refusing to compromise your values, trusting the process even when the process felt like drowning. They're trying to package authenticity into a system, to bottle organic responses into repeatable techniques, to transform genuine character into teachable skills. And while some of it translates, the core of it, the essence of what made you effective, that can't be taught. That's something you either are or you aren't. That's the difference between performing integrity and embodying it. That's the gap between strategic appearances and authentic being. And that gap is exactly what makes you the subject they can't stop studying. Because they can see the results, they can observe the outcomes, but they can't quite capture the alchemy that made it work. Oh, they thought you were done, didn't they? They really believed the story was over. The book was closed. The curtain had dropped on your little performance. They watched you stumble, watched you bleed, watched you crawl through the sharpest years of your existence. And somewhere in their twisted little minds, they wrote your obituary before you even stopped breathing. But here's the thing that's eating them alive right now. The thing that's keeping them awake at 3 a.m. scrolling through your life trying to decode what the hell just happened. You weren't even trying. You weren't flexing. You weren't proving anything to anyone. That was 0.1% of what lives inside you, and it shattered their entire reality like glass hitting concrete. Can you even imagine what happens when you stop playing small? When you stop dimming your light to make their insecurities comfortable? When you finally decide to show up at full capacity? Let's rewind for a second because they need to understand what they witnessed, what they're still trying to rationalize, what they're desperately trying to minimize in conversations with people who never even met you. For months, maybe years, you operated on reserve power, on fumes, on the absolute minimum energy required to keep your heart beating and your lungs moving. You were running on emergency mode, the kind of survival setting that kicks in when life has beaten you so badly that just getting out of bed feels like climbing Everest in your sleep. And during that time, during that chapter they thought was your final form, during that season they assumed was your peak and your valley all at once, you still managed to do something they couldn't comprehend. You still loved people who didn't deserve it. You still showed up to rooms that didn't celebrate you. You still created, still dreamed, still smiled through the kind of pain that would have hospitalized their spirit. That wasn't strength. That wasn't courage. That wasn't you trying. That was you existing on 0.1%. And it still outshined everything they were giving at 100%. Now, let's talk about the collapse, the implosion, the complete and total disintegration of their confidence that happened the moment you started healing. The second you began to remember who the hell you actually were before life taught you to shrink. They watched you stand up straighter, and it felt like an earthquake. They saw you speak with certainty, and it sounded like thunder. They noticed you stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped explaining your choices, stopped seeking permission to exist loudly, and suddenly their whole social hierarchy started cracking. Because here's what they never told you, what they'll never admit, even under oath. What keeps them up at night, staring at ceilings they can't afford, because they spent their energy trying to dim your star instead of building their own. You were never the problem. You were the standard. You were the mirror they couldn't look into without seeing every compromise they made, every dream they abandoned, every excuse they worshipped, like it was strategy. Your 0.1% reminded them of the 100% they'll never touch, because they're too busy managing perceptions instead of building substance, too occupied with looking successful instead of becoming capable, too addicted to the comfort of mediocrity dressed in designer labels and borrowed confidence. The moment you stopped performing for their approval, stopped auditioning for roles in productions you never wanted to star in, stopped contorting yourself into shapes that fit their narrow definitions of acceptable, that's when their world started collapsing. Not loudly, not dramatically, but slowly, steadily, like a building with a cracked foundation finally giving in to gravity. They tried to gaslight you into thinking you were changing in a bad way, that your boundaries were aggression, that your standards were arrogance, that your peace was privilege. They threw everything at you. Every manipulation tactic in the handbook, every guilt trip, every silent treatment, every indirect post meant to pull you back into the arena where they could manage you, control you, predict you. But you didn't bite, you didn't engage, you didn't even flinch. And that indifference, that refusal to dance to music you didn't choose, that's what truly broke them, because they realized they no longer had power over your emotions, your decisions, your narrative. And people who built their entire identity on controlling others absolutely cannot survive the moment their puppets cut the strings and walk away. Let's get specific about this 0.1% they witnessed, because they're still trying to convince themselves it was luck, timing, connections, anything except the truth that you are fundamentally operating on a different frequency than they'll ever access. That 0.1% looked like you finally saying no without a paragraph of justification. It looked like you choosing yourself without guilt. It looked like you walking away from tables where you were the topic but never the guest of honor. It looked like you building in silence while they celebrated in noise. It looked like you healing your trauma instead of recycling it into content for sympathy. It looked like you becoming so comfortable in your own skin that their opinions felt like distant weather in a country you'll never visit. And they watched all of this happen, watched you transform without their input, without their advice, without their validation, and it destroyed the illusion they'd built that you needed them, that you were lucky to be in their circle, that they were doing you a favor by keeping you around as the person they could feel superior to whenever their own lives felt empty. But here's where it gets beautiful, where the story takes a turn they never saw coming because they were too busy writing your ending to notice you were just beginning. That 0.1% was your warm-up, your stretching before the race, your sound check before the concert, and they mistook it for your grand finale. They threw parties celebrating your departure, convinced themselves they won, told stories about how they always knew you weren't built for their level, how you couldn't handle the pressure, how you were all potential and no execution. They got comfortable in your absence, redistributed your energy among themselves like vultures picking at what they thought was a carcass, never realizing you weren't dead, you were metamorphosing. And butterflies don't announce their arrival, they just show up one day and make the whole garden look different. So, while they were busy toasting to your failure, you were busy becoming unforgettable, not through revenge, not through proving them wrong, but through the simple, devastating act of becoming so aligned with your truth that their version of you became fiction, became mythology, became a story they tell themselves to sleep better at night, knowing they had you and lost you forever. Imagine, just for a second, just for the sake of watching their faces drain of color, what happens when you stop operating on reserve power and actually plug into your full capacity. When you stop being polite with your presence and start being powerful with your purpose. That 0.1% built a life they envy while you were still healing. Now imagine 1%, imagine 10%, imagine 50%. Imagine the moment you decide that playing small was a courtesy you no longer owe to people who never appreciated your kindness as kindness but mistook it for weakness. Imagine them watching you move through the world with the kind of confidence that doesn't need validation, the kind of success that doesn't need announcement, the kind of peace that doesn't need defense. Imagine them realizing that every narrative they sold about you was just their fear of who you were becoming. Every lie they spread was just a prayer that you'd stay broken. Every smile they gave you was just a mask, hiding the terror that one day you'd remember your power and never look back. The collapse wasn't just their world, it was their identity, their hierarchy, their entire social structure that depended on you playing a role you outgrew the moment you realized. The script was written by people who never wanted you to have a speaking part, let alone the leading role in your own story. They needed you to be the supporting character, the one who makes them look good, the one who absorbs the pain so they can avoid their own, the one who stays stuck so they can feel like they're moving forward. But the moment you stepped into your 0.1%, the moment you stopped accepting crumbs and started baking your own bread, the moment you looked at their table and realized you'd rather eat alone than feast with people who starve your spirit, that's when everything they built on your submission, your silence, your sacrifice, came crashing down like a house of cards in a hurricane they didn't see coming, because they were too busy admiring their own reflection to notice the storm gathering behind them. And now they're living in the aftermath of their own arrogance, watching you from a distance they can't close no matter how hard they try, because you're not the same person they knew. You're not even the same species anymore. You evolved past their frequency. You're operating on wavelengths they can't detect, can't disrupt, can't decode. They're sending indirect messages, hoping you'll respond. They're telling mutual friends they miss you, hoping it'll get back to you and soften your resolve. They're posting content clearly aimed at your attention, dropping your favorite songs, mentioning your old haunts, performing nostalgia like it's a magic spell that'll reverse time and bring you back to the version of you they could manage, control, predict. But you're not coming back, because you didn't leave them. You left who you had to become to tolerate them. And the person you are now wouldn't even recognize the person who accepted their treatment as normal, their disrespect as friendship, their manipulation as love. Let's talk about what happens next, about the future they're terrified of, the timeline where you're not holding back anymore, where that 0.1% becomes 1%, 10%, 100%, where you stop being the best kept secret and start being the loudest truth in every room you enter. They're scared because they know, even if they'll never admit it, that you were the most talented person in their circle and you were operating on fumes. They know you were the most intelligent person in their conversations and you were barely participating. They know you were the most capable person in their network and you weren't even trying. So what happens when you actually try? What happens when you stop dimming your light? What happens when you stop making yourself smaller to make them comfortable? What happens when you walk into your full power, your complete potential, your absolute truth? The answer is simple and devastating. They become irrelevant, not because you made them irrelevant, but because they made themselves irrelevant the moment they chose to tear down someone who could have built with them, the moment they chose competition over collaboration, the moment they chose ego over evolution. That 0.1% was your mercy, your grace period, your silent prayer that they'd wake up and realize what they had before it was too late. But they didn't wake up. They doubled down. They got louder. They got meaner. They got more desperate in their attempts to prove you were the problem, when really you were the solution. They were too blind to recognize. And now that you're healing, now that you're growing, now that you're glowing, they're scrambling to rewrite history, trying to take credit for your transformation like they were the catalyst. when really they were just the obstacle, the weight you had to learn to lift, the lesson you had to learn. So you'd never accept that treatment again from anyone, ever. Period. End of story. They want to be footnotes in your success story, but really they're just the rough draft you had to write before you learned your voice, the practice round before the real game, the tutorial level before you entered the actual arena where real players compete. Here's the thing about revealing 0.1% of your power and watching their whole world collapse. It teaches you something critical about energy, about presence, about the absolute truth that you don't need to announce your arrival. You just need to arrive. You don't need to prove you've changed. You just need to embody the change. You don't need to explain why you're different. You just need to be so different that explanation becomes irrelevant. They collapsed because they built their confidence on the belief that you'd always be below them, that you'd always need them, that you'd always come back, no matter how badly they treated you. And when that belief shattered, when that foundation cracked, when that narrative died, everything they constructed on top of it came tumbling down. Not because you destroyed it, but because it was never real to begin with. It was just an illusion they maintained. As long as you participated in the delusion, as long as you played the role, as long as you accepted the script. But you stopped accepting, you stopped participating, you stopped playing, and suddenly the whole production shut down because you were the only one bringing real energy, real talent, real substance to a stage full of people playing dress-up with borrowed confidence and rented personalities. And now they're auditioning for new victims, new people to make feel small so they can feel big, new empaths to drain so they can feel full, new spirits to break so they can feel whole. But it won't work the same way it worked with you, because you were special, you were rare. You were the kind of person they'll spend the rest of their lives trying to replace and failing, because you weren't just a person in their life. You were a moment in their existence when they touched something real, something pure, something powerful, and they were too immature, too insecure, too invested in their own illusions to recognize the treasure they were holding until it slipped through their fingers and transformed into something they can see but never touch again. Now let's talk about the future, your future, the timeline, where you're not concerned with their collapse because you're too busy building your kingdom, where you're not thinking about their regrets because you're too focused on your purpose, where you're not wondering if they've changed because you've changed so much that their evolution or lack thereof has zero impact on your trajectory. Imagine waking up every single day and not thinking about them once, not as revenge, not as avoidance, but as genuine indifference, as natural as not thinking about strangers on the street, as automatic as breathing. Imagine reaching a level of success where their names come up in conversation and you pause for a second trying to remember who they are, where their faces blur together with all the other background characters who played small roles in chapters you barely remember. Imagine becoming so aligned with your purpose, so locked into your vision, so committed to your growth that their opinions, their judgments, their narratives about you feel like ancient history, like gossip from a past life, like noise from a frequency you've evolved beyond. That 0.1% showed them who you were on your worst days, during your darkest seasons, in your most limited state. Now imagine who you're becoming on your best days, during your brightest chapters, in your most expanded form. Imagine them watching from the sidelines as you achieve everything they said you couldn't, as you become everything they said you'd never be, as you create everything they said was impossible, not because you're trying to prove them wrong, but because you stopped letting their limited vision of you define your unlimited potential. Imagine them watching you love yourself the way they never could, watching you choose yourself the way they never did, watching you celebrate yourself the way they never would, and realizing that their rejection wasn't your loss. It was your liberation. It wasn't your ending. It was your beginning. It wasn't your failure. It was your freedom. The collapse they experienced when you revealed 0.1% of your power wasn't just about you getting better. It was about them realizing how much better you always were and how blind they were to see it. How much energy you were suppressing to make them comfortable. How much light you were dimming to make them feel bright. How much power you were restraining to make them feel powerful. And now that you've stopped suppressing, stopped dimming, stopped restraining, they're living in a world where your absence is louder than your presence ever was, where your silence speaks volumes, where your indifference cuts deeper than any words ever could. They're haunted by the ghost of what could have been if they'd chosen to celebrate you instead of competing with you, if they'd chosen to elevate you instead of diminishing you, if they'd chosen to love you instead of using you as a stepping stone for their own broken egos. But here's the beautiful part, the part they'll never understand because they're still playing small, still thinking small, still living small. You didn't reveal 0.1% of your power to destroy them. You revealed it to save yourself, to remember yourself, to reclaim yourself from the prison of other people's expectations, projections, and limitations. Their collapse was just a side effect of your resurrection, a natural consequence of your transformation, an inevitable result of your evolution. You weren't trying to make them fall. You were trying to make yourself rise. And the moment you started rising, everyone who was standing on your shoulders trying to reach heights they couldn't climb on their own, they fell. Not because you pushed them, but because you simply stopped being their ladder, stopped being their stepping stone, stopped being their foundation while they treated you like pavement. And now they're on the ground looking up at you soaring, wondering how you got wings, wondering when you learned to fly, wondering why you're not coming back down to their level. Never realizing that you were always capable of flight. You were just convinced by people who couldn't leave the ground that walking was your limit, that crawling was your destiny, that staying small was your story. But you rewrote the story, you changed the ending, you became the author, the protagonist, the hero, and the victory all at once. And they're just characters in your origin story, the obstacles you overcame, the villains you defeated not with violence, not with vengeance, but with the simple, devastating act of becoming yourself fully, completely, unapologetically. Imagine going to 1% of your power, just 1%, and watching entire networks crumble, watching old alliances disintegrate, watching people who swore they'd never speak to each other bonding over their shared confusion about how you became untouchable, unreachable, unstoppable. Imagine going to 10% and watching industries shift, watching standards elevate, watching people you've never met cite you as their inspiration without knowing your name, watching your influence ripple through communities you've never entered, because your energy is so magnetic, so authentic, so pure, that it transcends physical proximity and touches souls through screens, through stories, through the subtle shifts in consciousness that happen when someone witnesses real power moving with real purpose. Imagine going to 50% and watching the world reshape itself around your vision, watching opportunities chase you instead of you chasing opportunities, watching people who once ignored you now study your every move, analyze your every word, trying to decode the formula, bottle the magic, replicate the success, never understanding that there is no formula, there is no magic. There is just you finally deciding to stop playing small in a world that needed you to stay small so it could feel big. On your worst days, during your darkest seasons, in your most limited state. Now imagine who you're becoming on your best days, during your brightest chapters, in your most expanded form. Imagine them watching from the sidelines as you achieve everything they said you couldn't, as you become everything they said you'd never be, as you create everything they said was impossible, not because you're trying to prove them wrong, but because you stopped letting their limited vision of you define your unlimited potential. Imagine them watching you love yourself the way they never could, watching you choose yourself the way they never did, watching you celebrate yourself the way they never would, and realizing that their rejection wasn't your loss. It was your liberation. It wasn't your ending. It was your beginning. It wasn't your failure. It was your freedom. The collapse they experienced when you revealed 0.1% of your power wasn't just about you getting better. It was about them realizing how much better you always were and how blind they were to see it. How much energy you were suppressing to make them comfortable. How much light you were dimming to make them feel bright. How much power you were restraining to make them feel powerful. And now that you've stopped suppressing, stopped dimming, stopped restraining, they're living in a world where your absence is louder than your presence ever was, where your silence speaks volumes, where your indifference cuts deeper than any words ever could. They're haunted by the ghost of what could have been if they'd chosen to celebrate you instead of competing with you, if they'd chosen to elevate you instead of diminishing you, if they'd chosen to love you instead of using you as a stepping stone for their own broken egos. But here's the beautiful part, the part they'll never understand because they're still playing small, still thinking small, still living small. You didn't reveal 0.1% of your power to destroy them. You revealed it to save yourself, to remember yourself, to reclaim yourself from the prison of other people's expectations, projections, and limitations. Their collapse was just a side effect of your resurrection, a natural consequence of your transformation, an inevitable result of your evolution. You weren't trying to make them fall. You were trying to make yourself rise. And the moment you started rising, everyone who was standing on your shoulders trying to reach heights they couldn't climb on their own, they fell. Not because you pushed them, but because you simply stopped being their ladder, stopped being their stepping stone, stopped being their foundation while they treated you like pavement. And now they're on the ground looking up at you soaring, wondering how you got wings, wondering when you learned to fly, wondering why you're not coming back down to their level. Never realizing that you were always capable of flight. You were just convinced by people who couldn't leave the ground that walking was your limit, that crawling was your destiny, that staying small was your story. But you rewrote the story, you changed the ending, you became the author, the protagonist, the hero, and the victory all at once. And they're just characters in your origin story, the obstacles you overcame, the villains you defeated, not